So guess what? I have a guest for you. And it was such a great conversation. I have to break it up into 2 episodes. So this is part 1 of a 2-parter interviewing Harry Travis. And I will tell you that Harry and I had a great conversation because Harry's a client. And so I've gotten to know Harry really well. We started working together about 8, 9 months ago. And he has the most wonderful origin story because he started what he's turned into a legitimate business now as more of a passion enterprise where he just wanted to stay connected after he left corporate. And it's just a wonderful story and speaks a lot to his personality and his commitment to other people. So you're going to love the episode. And I put him in a corner and said, all right, Harry, you come up with the prompt for my listener. So I put him on the spot a little bit with making him generate the prompt, but he actually did a really good job. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Harry Travis. Welcome to My Solopreneur Life. I'm Terry Pappy, your gracious host, and I am so glad you're here. I have a wonderful episode for you. Sit back, relax, and let's have some real talk about what it is to be a solopreneur. Welcome, Harry Travis, to the My Solopreneur Life show. You are my very first guest, and I couldn't have picked a better person to be on my show.
Hi, Terry, and I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. So we're going to
Oh,
have a conversation about starting, and I want my listener to know all about your starting experience with the current project and work that you're doing. But first, let's start with just a little bit of context around who you are, how you came up in the world, what you did in corporate, and that kind of led to where you're at right now as a solopreneur.
okay. So I was trained as a pharmacist at the University of Pittsburgh, practiced pharmacy a little in the community, actually in Washington, D.C., and then decided to get an MBA and went to the University of Virginia and got my MBA. And then that kind of took my career to the management side of the equation. I never really practiced pharmacy again after that and worked for primarily large corporations in product management, marketing, product development, general management roles at Baxter, Cardinal, and then was recruited to an interesting company in Memphis, Tennessee called Accredo Health, which was a specialty pharmacy in the late 90s as more and more as the early stage drugs were coming out that were protein based and needed a distribution channel that wasn't satisfied by retail or hospitals. So Accredo was one of the early, what we call in the industry, specialty pharmacies. We were acquired by Medco. I jumped out after that acquisition to look at other opportunities and then was recruited by Aetna and worked for Aetna in their specialty pharmacy and their PBM operation and mail order pharmacy, and ultimately ended up at CVS Caremark running a large portion of CVS Caremark's PBM and mail order and specialty pharmacy operation. So I have a lot of experience in the specialty pharmacy space and pharmacy operations and kind of at the intersection of pharmacy and insurance, health plan, and PBMs. And I left CVS a little over 2 years ago as part of a reorganization that allowed me to kind of leave with lots of friends intact and strike out on my own.
So before we continue, thanks for that, first of all, that kind of like synopsis. Really interesting. And what I'd like for my listener who aren't familiar with a lot of the aspects around pharmacy, PBM, and all that, I just want to hit a couple points. So specialty drugs are specifically what?
Specialty drugs are a group of prescription medicines that are generally defined by insurance companies. So it's a prescription drug that gets approved by the FDA And there's all sorts of different types of drugs that are approved by the FDA, antibiotics and anti-cholesterol drugs and different kinds of molecules and things like that. But there is a class or a subgroup. I don't want to call them a class because it sounds like that's something official designated by the FDA or boards of pharmacy, and it's not. It's technically what's called a kind of a term of art that insurance companies classify this set of drugs into a category that gets special treatment from an insurance standpoint. And generally, what distinguishes a drug or what makes a drug a specialty drug is that it's expensive, like real expensive, like 10 or 20 or 30 times more expensive than the average drug. So you're talking generally in the thousands of dollars per month for like a 30-day supply. It's $3,000 to $10,000 a month. There is a
Wow.
small set of these drugs that are in this class, but they consume or generate a large portion of the costs. A lot of the medications that you see on TV advertised, Humira, Enbrel, Skyrizi, Otezla, drugs like Rinvoq, drugs like that all fall into this category of specialty.
Gotcha. Okay. Now let's talk real briefly about PBMs and their role and how that's kind of like being a big concern today with the efficiency and applications of AI. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about AI as well, because that's super important. And I like to
Sure.
dribble a little bit of AI in a lot of my episodes because it's a strong interest for solopreneurs. So talk about PBMs and their role in the whole life cycle.
PBM stands for Prescription Benefit Managers. They are large companies that help employers or health plans. So you could be a freestanding employer, big or small, everybody from Ford Motor to your local body shop, or health plans like any kind of Blue Cross organization or commercial insurer who wants to manage the costs of prescriptions for the people who either work for them, my employees at Ford, or their enrollees, everyone who is enrolled in a Blue Cross, pick your state plan. Okay. How do we manage the prescription benefit for them and provide them with a network of pharmacies that they can go to and a predictable cost for your drug in terms of your co-insurance or your copay? So the PBMs are a middleman, and that term is, kind of kicked around a lot in today's world in lots of different industries. You don't want to be a middleman. Well, there's a lot of reason you need to be a middleman, and there's a lot of reason that we need middlemen out there to help all sorts of markets operate efficiently.
Gotcha. All right, cool. That's it for Pharmacy 101. I
All
just
right.
wanted to cover those two
All right.
particular areas. And just for my listener, Harry did an amazing presentation on the whole landscape life cycle of pharmacy and where all these things fit in from the pharmacy, or excuse me, the pharmaceutical company manufacturing, doing clinical trials, bringing it to market, and then how the PBMs get involved, and all the way down to the patient. And there's so many intricate parts. So you think healthcare is kind of a hot mess? Well, this may shed some light on it for you. So I will have a link to this in the show notes page on the site. So you can check that out if you really want to get your, up to your knees in the whole pharmacy thing and healthcare thing. And of course, Harry, you're a great resource for any of my listeners who want to explore the industry of that particular sector. So, okay, now getting back to Harry post CVS Caremark. What did you do?
So when I left the corporate world, and most of my career was in kind of small, no, I would say medium to large corporations. So there was a little bit of a disorientation when I got out. But it's what I wanted to do, so it wasn't involuntary. And I knew that I wanted to stay involved in the industry in some form. And I had identified or thought that it would be as a a board member or an advisor in some kind of solo consulting kind of role. And I did a couple of things. One, I just reinvested in myself and took a couple of courses. I took an executive level, an executive program course at Brown University on executive coaching. Anybody can hang out their shingle, call themselves an executive coach,
True.
right? Uh, or you can take the time to kind of go to a program and learn a little bit about the theory and sit around the table with a lot of smart people and talk about what works, what doesn't work. And I did that and I enjoyed it very much, and I'd highly recommend the program at Brown University on executive coaching. It's about a 6-month program, 3 weeks of it are in person, most of it is virtual. I also went to Harvard's executive program or their executive school. They've got lots of programs in their executive program there for new corporate directors. So they have a whole program at Harvard in their executive ed program around training people to be independent directors. Again, anybody can become a director on a board. Anybody can become an independent director. It's very much a who do you know and who's available and what skills are we looking for. But it also helps to sit down if you have the time and the money, these are not cheap programs, to sit in a place like Harvard's Business School around really smart people and go through a whole bunch of cases on board governance and things like that. So those kind of two of the formal things I did was, okay, let's just invest a little in myself and Harry to kind of position myself for the future. And then the other thing I did was just start classic networking, calling all my friends, figuring out where they were, what they were doing, and just letting them know, okay, I'm kind of transitioning to a new role. Think of me for all sorts of things. But even at that, it's still kind of undefined. Well, what are you thinking about, Harry? Well, I don't want to go back work full time, an advisory role. Well, what kind of company? I'm not sure. In the space of pharmacy where I have my skill set, but other kind of companies, they might be tech companies or device companies that need somebody with my background. So, you're working on your resume, or I'm working on my resume and how I'm positioning myself and networking with all my friends. And that was kind of the start of it.
So it's almost like you were looking for a job in a way, like you're investing obviously in education, boning up on these skills that you perhaps thought you might need in a role as a consultant or advisory board or something like that. And the reach out to your network, I mean, that outreach was very key to what ended up happening. And so as you were kind of just talking to people, email, getting on Zoom calls and just having conversations, how were you different in the way you had those conversations once on you were basically on your own and you were talking to someone who perhaps either was also on their own or was still in corporate? How did that change from who you might have been or how you might have been having that same conversation? Maybe it wouldn't be exactly the same, but a similar conversation if you were still in corporate. Like what shifted for you once you were free of that corporate bondage, if you will?
Right. Uh, I think I think one thing that changed is I was, I keep referring kind of in third person, you are. I was thinking that, okay, I need to transition more to a solo mindset. What can I contribute to an organization or an individual, as opposed to all of the positions I had through my corporate career were leadership positions where there's a big staff, you're talking about how you're leading a team, how you can evaluate people, how you can set and communicate goals. Well, that's not the role that I was looking for. It was more as, okay, why would some client or company want to work with me? What are they looking for in me? And I think that as I started the process, I realized, okay, there's maybe I'm working on like three work streams, if you will. One is to build the right skills, right? And that was the coaching and board governance. Two, how do you stay current in the industry when you lose all of kind of the corporate info flows that you get? You know, you're in a company, there is a flow of information, people are talking to you all the time, and you kind of get a sense of, you know what's going on in your market with your competitors and the regulators, and that's now all of a sudden you're outside. And it's like, oh, I've got to rebuild or build, not rebuild. I have to build a whole new kind of set of information flows into me. And then the third work stream was, okay, I just got to keep my communication channels open with my friends. And what I started to realize is, okay, how can I use my friends and my network as a way to stay connected to the industry? And is there a way that I can build an information network, if you will, a little bit of neural net of my friends to say, okay, we all probably are in the same spot. All of us would like to stay current in the industry. Those, us being individual solopreneurs, solo consultants, people who are ahead of me by a couple of years, who might have already had a board seat or something like that. But it's like, how do you stay plugged in? Wow, it's a real problem. I'm running around trying. I'm like, okay, maybe I can help keep everybody plugged in and create a little network in the process. And that led to an informal network that has grown into something bigger now.
That is I'm sorry, I'm just getting so excited to hear you talk about this because it was that moment that you had that clarity, that inception of what you're doing now. And it came out of not just like, this is what Harry needs, but it came out of, hey, I'm struggling with this problem. I wonder if anybody else is that may be in the same boat I am, AKA solopreneur, whether it's brand new out or rift or just decided they had enough of the corporate world and they wanted to start something on their own, but they weren't
Hmm.
quite ready to,
Right.
turn it all in and stuff. And I think that that moment is, it speaks of what I know of you. It speaks to your personality. And one word I've heard you use on this show so far a lot is friend. And I love how you're referring to this cadre of people as your friends, because that what I know of you again is that you view people this way, not professional colleagues or somebody I used to work with or somebody who's looking for me to scratch
Hmm.
their back and so on and so forth. I mean, this is, you really consider someone in your network, and according to LinkedIn, you have over 6,000 followers. You've got a grand audience that's very, like, a lot of these people and you have had experiences with them, you've talked to them. And I think that's remarkable in today's very chaotic, noisy world, especially since you came out of corporate. And yeah, when you're in corporate, you have kind of like a small bubble that you work within your team, your executive folks that your stakeholders and so on and so forth. But it's relatively, even though you might be in a, 100,000 workforce, that bubble that you're working with, those are your immediate colleagues that you're pretty much kind of dealing with on a
Right.
regular basis. Now, that's so much bigger because of what you've done. So let's talk about what happened after, or as a catharsis of that kind of like aha moment where you saw a problem in the marketplace that was not only your problem, but hey, could there other people also be struggling with this problem?
So I start, like I said, I started by just calling a bunch of classic networking. Okay. And I discovered, okay, I've got maybe a dozen or 2 dozen friends that fell into a category. I've had lots of friends. Some of them were still working for large corporations and small corporations, but there was a subset of them that were independent. And they were either independent because they wanted to be independent, or they were independent because they were looking for a job. They were in transition, but they were independent,
Right.
and they were friends. And I just made a very selfish decision at the time, and I proposed it to people this way. I said, look, I want to stay in touch with you. And they would say, yeah, I want to stay in touch with you. I'm like, okay, but I don't want to make 18 calls a month. Okay? That's just the way. And it's going to get boring. Well, let's face it. But I do want to have a frequency. So why don't I just, and I joked about it because I said if we all lived in the same city, I would be the guy organizing the monthly bar crawl. Not that I'm a party animal, but we would just, I'd try to organize something that once a month we would go somewhere and we would just, exchange war stories. But we can't do that. But now we all know Zoom really well. Thank you, COVID. Okay, we're all
Yeah.
real comfortable meeting online. So I'll just organize a monthly Zoom call. And there will be two rules to join. The first is you've got to be independent. And the second was, and I just kind of off the top of my head, you got to be an FOH. You got to be a friend of Harry because that I'm not the first one to come up with that acronym. Bill Clinton, you were an FOB, you were a friend of Bill or whatever. There are plenty of famous people who are FO fill in the blank. Okay,
Hmm.
but we joked about that and we started with just a couple of those. I said I'll bring the agenda as the glue to hold everybody together. Uh, and I think also, and I was fairly kind of obvious about this in the beginning. So we all are looking for a little more fellowship. We're all out here on our
Definitely.
own. And maybe no one wants to say it, but I'll say it. It's lonely.
Yeah.
It is just lonely when you're out on your own. Okay. And there's only so many phone calls you can take where it's just one-on-one, where we're looking for a little more camaraderie, a little more fellowship. Can I belong to something bigger than my little solo consultancy? So I thought, okay, I can kind of scratch that itch, and I got plenty of positive from that. The other thing I noticed is that there are plenty of expert networks out there that as this thing started to grow, but, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I thought I'm going to do something for the members other than just kind of resell their services.
Right.
I'll try to create something that people want to come to the meetings to learn or to meet new people. So started as a small group of just my friends, and it has now grown into something that we call the RX Roundtable. Probably have 70 or so members. Of those members, I can honestly say only maybe a third of them are primary friends of mine. Everyone else is now a new friend that has come as a result of somebody else, which is great, which is terrific. I meet somebody new, at least one or two people new every week.
That's great. Um, I love it. It's just, if I'm already familiar with your story, so I have an advantage to my listener that I know Harry's story because he dragged me into his story. And what I want to do now is I want to kind of like partition our conversation. And as you know, because you're a listener to my Solopreneur life, this first part of what you've shared with me and my listener today is kind of here's my background. I left corporate and then this is what happened. I got smart. I, took some training, decided still got some fuel in the tank. I want to keep going. And this is what I saw as a problem. So, given up to this point, because I'm going to make this a two-parter for my listener, up to this point, there's some very pivotal things that happen. Now, as you know, I always like to add a prompt in my shows because I want my listener to take action and create real value for them, not just listening for entertainment or inspiration, but really to see how they can apply whatever we're discussing or whatever I'm putting forward into their own life and really be actionable about it. So, what
Hmm.
I'd like for you to do is I'm going to invite you, Harry, to come up with a prompt. And I'll give you a little help here because I know you weren't expecting this. But what I'd like for you to do is let's imagine there's someone like you who's left corporate or left their job or whatever. They want to do their own thing. And what are some things like, give me three things that they can be in action about initially? Because I'll ask you to do this again in the second part, right? What
Hmm.
are three things that they can do initially once they make the decision, I want to be a solopreneur, I'm going to start my own gig? Fire away.
Ooh. Uh, I guess the first is, okay, you want to be a solopreneur. What's your business model or what's your value proposition? What are you trying to sell? Okay, are you, and I'll just kind of hypothesize on are you trying to sell a technical skill? Okay, I'm a regulatory expert and I want to find a whole bunch of companies who need a is there a particular skill set that you have? What is it? It could be anything from executive coaching to leadership development to a more kind of functional skill. I'm an automation expert, and okay, what's the market for automation experts? Or I'm an IT expert. What's the market for them? So step one is to really try to figure out what are you trying to sell? Because I know it's interesting as I think about it. There are I'm just thinking about some of the people that I've met, friends of mine. Uh, a number of them are deep subject matter experts in kind of technical areas, and that seems to be an easier transition to getting to a value proposition and nailing a couple clients versus kind of the other half of my friends who are more generalists. They were in leadership positions. They were general managers or chief operating officers or in that position. Then it becomes, okay, what skill are you trying to sell and how big is the market for that that capability, that competence of I am wider than I am deeper versus I am deeper than I am wider. I just think that the transition when you are more a subject matter expert, a deep is maybe a little bit easier. Okay. Not to say one's right or wrong, or there isn't a big market out there for both. I just think that the generalist it's harder to find that niche as a generalist or the opportunities as a generalist. Another important step when you're out on your own and whether you're looking for jobs as a consultant or selling your services, or you're looking for positions, looking to get hired, I think it is real important to stay positive, duh, okay. But one way to do that is not to be afraid of surrounding yourself with people who you really trust and know and who understand your inherent value and will just give you a little bit of a boost when the day is a little long or you're getting rejected or nobody's returning your emails or that sort of thing. And I tell that to a lot of people who I know who are kind of starting their job search. And I say, don't be afraid to lean on a couple friends and tell them that, okay, I'm including you in an inner circle of positivity and I need your help. And don't be afraid to say that. Okay. And it's just a chat for 15 minutes at the end of a long week or something like that to find out how you're doing and how I'm doing, that sort of thing. And you'll know the right people to put in that group based on the depth of your friendship with them. I think trying to figure out how you kind of put yourself out there in a more public mode than just word of mouth. Okay, word of mouth is great. It's comfortable. You're talking to people. People are introducing you to people. But that only will get you so far. And it's a numbers game. You've got to get your visibility, your presence out there, either through some kind of social media or email or the written word or a podcast or things like that. And I think it is the courage to realize that I have value and I'm going to shout it from the mountaintop. Now, not in a loud, egotistical way, but you've got to get comfortable with getting your name and your voice out there. Is it LinkedIn? Is it X? Is it speaking engagements at shows or conventions? But yeah, you don't have all of the security of a corporation to just kind of go with the flow. Okay. And it's to do that, you've got to be confident in yourself and what your abilities are, that you can just kind of step out in the strange places to meet people that you've never met before, or go to a conference that you've never attended before and just start meeting people. And I think in general, people are, very receptive to meet new people. It's just getting yourself into the position where you can kind of crack that ice.
Yeah. And you've proven time and time again the value of the network, but you're right. You have to be the first one to stick your hand out and say, hey, do you have a minute? And not
Hmm.
in a salesy way, but in a like, how can we support each other and let's talk? I'd like to get to know
Right.
you, which is very different energy than the pitch mania that we have
Hmm.
today in today's world. Well, listen, I'm going to push the pause button and we're going to continue on the second part of my interview on starting with Harry Travis. Well, I know you're disappointed, but that's it for this episode. Listen, the great news is there's another one coming, so stay tuned. Anyway, I just want to make sure that you do the prompt if this episode had a prompt and you get that homework done because you're going to be a better solopreneur. How's that for a maternal finger shaking at you? Hey, listen, thanks so much for being here, for giving me time of your day, and, for taking it on. So if you want to learn more and stay connected with me, just head on over to mysolopreneurlife.com. Thanks a bunch. See you soon. That was pretty good. I think I'll keep that one. Bye.